Fake engagement gone wrong. I accidentally said I do to my nemesis. If someone told me I'd come home from a business trip and get proposed to by my childhood nemesis, I'd have laughed, choked on my coffee, and moved to another planet. But guess what? That's exactly what happened. 1 minute, I'm craving sweatpants and Netflix. The next, Declan Wolf, human embodiment of smugness, is in my living room saying, "I'm here to propose." Spoiler, it gets worse. There's fake dating and accidental marriage, yes, marriage, and somewhere along the way, I think I might have caught feelings. Oops. Stick around, because this story is pure chaos, and it's all true. Kind of. Silly story begins. Please like and subscribe. Chapter 1: The Proposal from Hell. If I had known that coming back from a business trip would result in a marriage proposal from the man I hate most in this world, I would have faked a passport emergency, missed my flight, or, better yet, launched myself out of the plane midair. Skydiving without a parachute sounded less painful than what awaited me. But fate, also known as the universe's chaotic intern, who clearly flunked their ethics course, had other plans. I was exhausted. 4 days of back-to-back client meetings, 2 red-eye flights, and a hotel room with a bed that had the emotional warmth of a plank of wood had drained the life out of me. I just wanted 3 things: sweatpants, Netflix, and the comforting arms of my overpriced coffee machine. Maybe a nap that didn't involve waking up in a panic thinking I missed a meeting. Instead, I opened the door to my apartment and stepped straight into what could only be described as a romantic ambush. There he was, Declan Wolf, the human equivalent of a paper cut, a walking, talking reminder that smugness could, in fact, be weaponized. He was lounging on my couch like he owned the place, one arm draped lazily over the backrest, legs crossed with casual arrogance, and a self-satisfied smirk that screamed, "I ruin lives for fun." I froze in the doorway, my suitcase still in hand, wheels refusing to roll as if even they sensed the hostility radiating off me. And sitting right next to him, like this was just your average Tuesday, was my mother, Diana Quinn, sipping tea from the Boss Mom mug I'd bought her last Christmas. She looked completely at ease, as if having my nemesis in my apartment was as normal as dust bunnies under the couch. "Hi, sweetheart," Mom said, setting her mug down with an innocent smile that I now realize was the look all Bond villains must have perfected. I blinked, then blinked again, hoping that when I opened my eyes, the universe would correct itself. Maybe Declan would vanish in a puff of smug-scented smoke. No such luck. Declan stood up, adjusting his annoyingly tailored navy suit. The man dressed like he had a secret deal with Italian designers. Not a wrinkle in sight. Unlike my soul at that moment, he smoothed his jacket with practiced ease and stepped forward, radiating the kind of confidence only someone with zero self-awareness could possess. Then he said it. "I'm here to propose." The words hung in the air like an unwanted party guest, awkward, confusing, and impossible to ignore. I squinted, convinced I'd misheard him. Maybe he'd said, "I'm here to dispose," and he'd finally come to confess to being a garbage person. But no, Declan Wolf didn't deal in metaphorical trash. He was the metaphorical trash. I dropped my bag with a loud thud, crossing my arms tightly over my chest. "Is this some kind of twisted prank, or did you hit your head on the way here?" Declan's grin widened like he was enjoying this. Like I was the entertainment? Neither. Though if I had, it might explain why I thought this was a good idea. I opened my mouth to unleash a carefully crafted insult. Something about his overpriced cologne, and the way his jawline looked like it had a personal vendetta against humanity, when my mother leaned in conspiratorially. "At least hear him out, he's rich," she whispered, as if that explained everything. Cue existential crisis. I pinched the bridge of my nose, counting to 5 like my therapist suggested. It didn't help, mostly because my therapist had never prepared me for this. There were no coping strategies for unexpected proposals from lifelong enemies. Declan casually picked up an apple from the fruit bowl on my kitchen counter, my apple, and bit into it like this was just another day at the office. His perfectly white teeth made an unnecessary crunch, the sound grating against my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. "Look," he said, mouth annoyingly full yet somehow still attractive, which only made me angrier. "I'm not exactly thrilled to be here either, Quinn." "Ah yes, the use of my last name? Because nothing says romance like pretending I'm a coworker he barely tolerates." I crossed the room, snatched the apple out of his hand, and glared. "Start explaining before I use, this is a projectile." Mom gave a dramatic sigh, standing up, and straightening her already immaculate cardigan. "Declan is here because, surprise, your families have a little arrangement. A business merger to be precise. And what better way to seal the deal than with an engagement between our brilliant children?" I stared. I'm sorry. Did you just try to sell me like a corporate asset? Declan added, technically, you're more of a strategic acquisition. I threw the half-eaten apple at his head. He dodged. Smugly. Mom clapped her hands like this was adorable. Oh, you two have such chemistry? Yes. The kind of chemistry that results in lab explosions. I looked back and forth between them, my brain refusing to process this like it was a bad Wi-Fi connection. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, collapsing onto the arm of the couch, staring at the ceiling like it might offer me an escape route. This is a nightmare. I'm going to wake up. And none of this will be real. Declan sat opposite me, resting his elbows on his knees. Oh, it's real. Trust me, I'm just as horrified as you are. I threw a cushion at him. He didn't dodge that one. Small victories. This was it. The day my life officially became a bad romantic comedy. And the worst part, the story was just getting started. Chapter 2, The Pact of Mutual Disgust. If Chapter 1 of my impending emotional breakdown was titled The Proposal from Hell, then Chapter 2 was shaping up to be The Pact of Mutual Disgust, featuring yours truly, Sophie Quinn, and the human embodiment of an overconfident PowerPoint presentation, Declan Wolfe. Let's backtrack. After my mother's corporate-inspired bombshell, surprise, you're now part of a hostile takeover disguised as an engagement, we sat through the world's most uncomfortable dinner. Imagine trying to eat lasagna while your mom casually discusses wedding venues, your nemesis critiques your table manners, and you contemplate whether stabbing him with a fork would qualify as justifiable homicide. Spoiler, it wouldn't. I googled it later. Declan sat across from me, cutting his lasagna with surgical precision, like even pasta wasn't safe from his need for control. Meanwhile, I aggressively sawed through mine as if my plate was the metaphorical heart of this entire situation. So Sophie, Declan's mother, Vivian Wolfe, picture a woman whose pearls probably had their own insurance policy, began. Have you thought about what kind of dress you'd like? I almost choked on a breadstick. Whoa, definitely. I was thinking something traditional, like a suit of armor. Declan snorted into his wine glass, and I shot him a look sharp enough to slice through his perfectly coiffed ego. After what felt like the longest meal in human history, seriously, I aged at least 5 years, we finally escaped the parental pressure cooker. Declan pulled me aside as I was plotting my exit strategy, which may or may not have involved scaling the fire escape. He leaned against the hallway wall with that infuriating, effortless cool, like he was auditioning for a cologne commercial called Smug, for men who think they're better than you. I hate this as much as you do, he said, folding his arms. I mirrored him, crossing my own arms, because, apparently, we were in a battle of who could look more annoyed. Good. So what's the plan, Romeo? Because I'm one awkward brunch away from faking my own death. Declan's lips curled into that trademark smirk, the smirk responsible for, at least 80% of my stress-induced headaches since childhood. Simple. We pretend to be engaged, keep the parents happy, secure the business deal, then stage the most dramatic breakup Fairview has ever seen. I blinked. That's your plan? He shrugged. Do you have a better one? Oh, I had ideas. Most of them involved setting things on fire. But sadly, arson wasn't exactly a sustainable long-term strategy. I paced the hallway, my mind racing, faster than my Wi-Fi during peak hours. So, let me get this straight. We fake an engagement, suffer through family events, endure each other's existence, and then, poof, break up? Declan nodded, like this was the most reasonable suggestion anyone had ever made. Exactly. I squinted at him. You make it sound like ordering takeout. Yes, I'll have one fake engagement with a side of emotional repression, please. His grin widened. You're not wrong. I rubbed my temples. There are so many ways this could go wrong. Declan pushed off the wall and took a step closer, his hands casually sliding into his pockets. And yet, it's still better than the alternative, actual marriage. Touché. I let out a dramatic sigh, the kind that deserved an Oscar. Fine. But if we're doing this, we need rules. Rules? He arched an eyebrow, like the very concept amused him. Yes. Rules. Boundaries. A code of conduct to prevent me from strangling you in your sleep. Sounds romantic already? I ignored him. Rule 1. No unnecessary physical affection. None of that fake darling nonsense, unless absolutely required. Declan nodded, his expression mock serious. Agreed. But what counts as absolutely required? Asking for a friend. I rolled my eyes. Weddings, family gatherings, and any situation where not acting in love would raise suspicions. Got it. Minimal fondling. Zero fondling. Harsh, but okay. I continued. Rule 2. We don't get personal. No prying into each other's lives. This is strictly business? Perfect. I don't want to know your favorite color anyway. Good. I don't have one. He snorted. Of course you don't. I ignored that. Rule 3. We set an end date. The moment our parents sign the merger papers, we stage the breakup, dramatic enough to be believable, but not so messy that we end up on a reality TV show. Declan's eyes gleamed with mischief. I was thinking something with public tears. Maybe throw in a shattered wine glass for effect. Sure. I deadpanned. And I'll dramatically scream, I never loved you, in the middle of a fancy restaurant. Now you're getting it? Despite myself, I felt the corners of my mouth twitch. No. Focus, Sophie. This is war. I cleared my throat. Rule 4. Declan cut me off. No falling in love? His words hung in the air like a challenge. I snorted. Please. That's the easiest rule of all? He smirked. We'll see. I hated how confident he sounded. Like he thought I would be the one to break first. As if. I stuck out my hand. Deal? Declan looked at my hand for a second, then shook it. His grip was warm, firm, and annoyingly perfect like everything else about him. Deal, he said. And just like that, the pact of mutual disgust was sealed. What could possibly go wrong? Answer? Everything. Chapter 3. Fake fiancé fiasco. If anyone ever tells you that faking a relationship is easy, punch them. Politely. Maybe with a pillow. Because let me tell you, pretending to be madly in love with Declan Wolfe was like trying to pass off a potato as a diamond. It required a lot of effort, zero sparkle, and left everyone vaguely suspicious. Our first public display of affection happened at a brunch hosted by his family. Because nothing says romantic chemistry like lukewarm quiche and passive-aggressive small talk. I was determined to sell the act. Declan's family was all polished smiles, perfectly creased napkins, and emotional repression dressed up in designer labels. I figured a little affectionate charm would do the trick. So, in a moment of pure, misguided inspiration, I reached over and patted Declan on the head. Yes. Like a golden retriever. I even added, good fiancé. Who's a good boy? You are. Silence. Declan froze mid-sip of his coffee, lowering his mug slowly like he was processing whether I'd just lost my mind, or if he needed to call someone about it. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing in a way that made me think he was calculating the exact velocity required to launch me into space. Across the table, his cousin Clara choked on her mimosa. Declan cleared his throat, leaned in with that infuriating calm, and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, if you ever do that again, I'm sending you a bill for emotional damages. I grinned like an unrepentant gremlin. You're welcome, but that was just the warm-up act. The real chaos began a week later when Jasper Black, the ex-boyfriend I'd mentally filed under regrets and bad life choices, decided to resurface like an unwanted pop-up ad. I ran into him at a networking event downtown. It was one of those pretentious affairs where people pretended to enjoy canapés smaller than their egos and exchanged business cards like Pokemon. Jasper spotted me across the room, his signature smirk plastered on his face like he'd copyrighted it. He sauntered over, all charm and cologne, looking annoyingly attractive in that I'm probably emotionally unavailable but you'll find out too late kind of way. Sophie Quinn, he drawled, like my name was a fine wine he wanted to savor. It's been a while. I plastered on my fakest smile, the one I reserved for department store salespeople and, apparently, ex-boyfriends. Jasper. I thought you'd moved to, what was it? A place with zero self-awareness. He laughed like I was adorable, which only made me want to set something on fire. I was just thinking about you. Of course you were. Before I could come up with a snarky comeback, I felt a familiar presence beside me, Declan, appearing out of nowhere like the universe's answer to my unspoken prayer for an escape route. Except I didn't escape. Oh no. My inner chaos gremlin took the wheel. Without thinking, because thinking would have involved logic, and I left that behind the moment Jasper's smug face entered the chat. I grabbed Declan's arm, plastered myself against him, and said with the enthusiasm of someone winning an Oscar, meet Declan. My perfect fiancé. He's rich, emotionally unavailable, and taller than you. Declan didn't even flinch. Not a flicker of surprise. Instead, he wrapped his arm around my waist like we'd done this 100 times before, leaned down, and pressed a soft, annoyingly perfect kiss to my temple. The audacity. He lingered there for half a second longer than necessary, then whispered, I'd say I love you, but I don't want to oversell it. My brain short-circuited. I managed to keep my face neutral, but inside, my emotions were doing the Macarena. Jasper's expression was priceless. His smirk faltered, his jaw tightened, and I could practically see the calculations behind his eyes. Is she really over me? Did she trade up? Is he taller? Declan's hand subtly squeezed my waist, a silent message that said, "You're welcome." I resisted the urge to elbow him in the ribs, barely. "Well," Jasper said, clearing his throat like he needed to swallow his pride. "Congratulations. You two seem happy." "Oh, so happy," I chirped, resting my head dramatically on Declan's shoulder. Sometimes I look at him and think, wow, this is the man I'm going to tolerate for the rest of my life. Declan chuckled softly, his breath warm against my ear. "The feeling's mutual, darling?" Jasper made some excuse to leave, probably to go process his bruised ego in the nearest bathroom mirror. The moment he was out of sight, I untangled myself from Declan like he was made of bees. "Emotionally unavailable?" he repeated, arching an eyebrow. I shrugged. I was improvising. "Well, remind me to never sign you up for improv classes." "I couldn't help it," I laughed. Which was weird because Declan Wolf was not supposed to be funny. He was supposed to be annoying, infuriating, the human equivalent of a traffic jam. But as we left the event, his hand brushed mine briefly, and for a split second, it didn't feel like acting. I shoved that thought into the same mental folder as Jasper. Feelings to ignore immediately. After all, this was just a fake fiancé fiasco. Nothing more. Right. Chapter 4, The Rival Who Wasn't the Thing About Exes? They never reappear in your life for pure, innocent reasons. There's always an agenda, hidden under layers of charm, cologne and perfectly timed texts that say things like, "Hey, saw your favorite coffee shop. Thought of you?" Translation: I'm bored and my ego needs attention. Jasper Black was no exception. At first, I thought he'd come crawling back, because he'd realized the monumental mistake of letting me go. I mean, who wouldn't? But Declan, with his annoyingly perceptive brain, saw through it faster than I could say, "I regret my life choices." "He's not here for you," Declan said one afternoon while we were fake couple brunching, which is like regular brunch, but with 100% more eye rolling. I paused mid-sip of my overpriced latte. "Excuse me, Jasper? He's not trying to win you back. He's dating Isla." I blinked. "Isla Wolf? Your cousin Isla? The one with the cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass?" Declan nodded, shoving a forkful of eggs into his smug face. I gawked. "So you're telling me my ex is fake flirting with me to make your cousin jealous? What is this? A low-budget soap opera?" Declan just shrugged. "You attract drama like a moth to a dumpster fire." Rude. But also fair. Fast forward to the charity gala from hell, where I was forced to wear heels designed by someone who clearly hated feet. The event was a blur of sparkling lights, overpriced wine, and conversations about yachts I'd never own. And then, there he was, Jasper, lurking near the champagne fountain with Isla by his side, pretending he wasn't burning with jealousy. His eyes darted toward me like I was a shiny object he wanted back. Not because he actually cared, but because his fragile ego couldn't handle losing. Declan noticed, of course, because Declan notices everything. He leaned down, his breath warm against my ear, sending an unexpected shiver down my spine. "Let's traumatize your ex properly." I arched an eyebrow. "Define properly." His lips quirked into a devilish grin. "Kiss me like you mean it, darling." And because I have zero self-preservation instincts when it comes to bad decisions, I did. I grabbed him by the lapels of his stupidly tailored tux, and kissed him like my life depended on it. Like we weren't faking it. Like there wasn't a contract, or emotional baggage, or the lingering fact that I'd mentally drafted his obituary more than once. It was supposed to be strategic, petty, a performance. But then, something shifted. The world blurred, the noise faded, and all I could feel was him. The warmth of his hands on my waist. The way he pulled me closer like he'd forgotten we were pretending. The electricity, yes, literally electricity, that shot through me like some cliché from a bad romance novel. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, and not because of the heels. Declan's eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw something there. Something real. Then he cleared his throat, straightened his tie, and said, "Well, that was convincing." I laughed, too loud, too fake. Oscar-worthy. But as we walked away, hand in hand for the charade, my heart raced for reasons that had nothing to do with Jasper. And that terrified me more than any ex ever could. Chapter 5. Accidentally Hitched. You'd think after the whole accidental real feelings during a fake kiss incident, the universe would have cut me some slack. Maybe sent me a coupon for emotional stability. But no. Instead, it sent me to Santoro Bay, a picturesque coastal town known for white sand beaches, turquoise waters, and, apparently, accidental marriages. Declan and I were there for a business conference, which was already a nightmare, because it involved networking, small talk, and the constant risk of me committing homicide with a complimentary pen. We checked into a quaint little hotel that was suspiciously festive, flowers everywhere, heart-shaped decor, couples giggling like they were in a rom-com montage. But I was too tired to care. I just wanted a bed, Wi-Fi, and maybe a margarita the size of my face. The concierge handed us some paperwork. "Please sign these for check-in," she chirped, her smile suspiciously bright. We scribbled our names without reading, because who actually reads hotel documents? That's for people with time and functioning brain cells. Fast forward to the next morning. I was sitting in the lobby, sipping my coffee, minding my business, when the same overly cheerful concierge waltzed over. "Congratulations on your wedding." She beamed. I choked, literally choked, on my coffee. Declan had to slap me on the back, which was humiliating enough without the added bonus of surprise marriage being announced to a room full of strangers. I coughed out, "I'm sorry, what?" She held up a certificate with our names, all official and legal looking. "You signed your marriage license during our Santoro Bay Love Festival. Isn't that romantic?" I stared at the paper like it was a bomb. I married my nemesis? Without free cake? Declan, because he's the human embodiment of unbothered confidence, just sipped his coffee. Well, at least I didn't have to buy a ring. I nearly launched my mug at his face. We stormed back to the front desk, demanding an annulment. That's when the real fun began. "Oh no," the concierge said with an apologetic shrug. "The paperwork seems to be missing. Missing. Gone. Vanished. Like my dignity." We spent hours trying to sort it out, but every office we went to had the same answer: "Sorry, we can't find your file. Come back later." Declan found this hilarious. "Maybe fate's into chaotic matchmaking," he said with that infuriating smirk. I resisted the urge to throw him into the ocean. Barely. It wasn't until much later, months later, that I'd discover the truth. The paperwork didn't just disappear. My mother, Diana Quinn, professional meddler, chaos enthusiast, and now apparently a criminal mastermind, had orchestrated the entire thing. But that's a story for another day. At that moment, standing in the middle of Santoro Bay, accidentally married to Declan Wolfe, I had one very clear thought: I am going to kill him. Or kiss him again. Maybe both. Chapter 6. The jealousy spiral. There comes a time in every woman's life when she makes a decision so petty, so fueled by pure spite, that even her future self looks back and whispers, "Wow. Bold." For me, that decision was dating Leo Maddox. Leo was everything Declan Wolfe wasn't. Sweet, emotionally intelligent, the kind of guy who listened. Like actually listened, not just nodded while mentally planning his grocery list. He read books that didn't have corporate strategy in the title. He volunteered at animal shelters. His smile was disarming, his laugh genuine. And, not to brag, I met him while I was not having a public meltdown, which felt like a personal growth milestone. The point was simple: I wasn't affected by Declan. At all. Zero emotional turbulence. Just calm, rational maturity. Except, well, the universe has a sick sense of humor. Because on our fourth date, Leo suggested, "How about a double date? My friend's bringing his girlfriend. Could be fun." Fun. A word I'd like to have a long, angry conversation with. We arrived at a cozy little restaurant, the kind with dim lighting and overpriced appetizers, only to find Leo's friend was none other than Declan Wolfe, human stress ball, and the reason my eye had developed a spontaneous twitch. I froze. Declan froze. Our eyes met across the table, like two rival gladiators realizing they'd been signed up for a team-building exercise. Declan's date? Whoa. Just his smugness. I plastered on my brightest, most definitely not affected smile, and slid into the booth beside Leo, determined to win this accidental showdown. Small talk began. Leo was charming, of course. Declan was insufferable, naturally. And I was busy pretending I didn't notice the way Declan kept glancing at me, like he was mentally drafting a snarky Yelp review of my life choices. Then it happened. Halfway through the salad course, "The salad, for God's sake," Leo casually asked Declan. "So, how's life? You seemed a bit tense last session." Session? My fork paused midair. Declan's jaw clenched so tightly, I thought I heard his molars file a complaint. Leo, oblivious, continued, "You were talking about your fake relationship. That whole fiancé situation. Wild stuff. The air grew so thick you could have sliced it with a butter knife." Declan's eyes slowly shifted to me. Then back to Leo. Back to me. Leo blinked, his therapist brain finally firing on all cylinders. His face went through the 5 stages of realization. 1. Confusion. Wait. 2. Recognition. No, it couldn't be. 3. Connection. Oh no, it is. 4. Internal screaming. I'm dating my patient's fake fiancé. 5. Resignation. Therapist of the Year, right here. Declan pushed back from the table, tossing his napkin down like it had personally offended him. I paid you $200 an hour to give me relationship advice about my own relationship. And with that, he stormed out. Leo sat there, shell-shocked, staring at his salad like it held the meaning of life. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did both at the same time, which, let me tell you, really confused the waiter when he came to refill our water. Chapter 7. Secrets, Lies, and Childhood Contracts. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this: never trust a family dinner that comes with an ominous "we have something to discuss." Nothing good has ever followed that sentence. Declan and I, still riding the emotional roller coaster of the therapist incident, sat at opposite ends of a painfully long dining table. Our parents, looking suspiciously pleased with themselves, poured wine like they were preparing for a toast. Spoiler, there would be no toasting. Halfway through the salad, seriously, what is it with revelations and salads? Declan's father cleared his throat. We thought it was time to tell you both the truth. I froze, fork mid-stab into a cherry tomato. If this is about the time I accidentally set the toaster on fire, that was an electrical issue. My mother gave me the look, you know, the one that says, "Hush, child. Adults are scheming. You've been betrothed since childhood," she said casually, as if she'd just announced the weather. I choked on my wine. Like, full-on coughing, gasping, "Is this how I die choking?" Declan just sat there, sipping his drink like this was old news. When I finally regained my ability to breathe and, more importantly, yell, I slammed my glass down. "I'm sorry. Are you telling me I've been contractually obligated to hate him since kindergarten?" "Not hate," his mother corrected sweetly. "Marry." Whoa. Well, that cleared things up. Not. I turned to Declan, expecting shock, horror, maybe even mild concern. Instead, he shrugged. I've known for years. He knew. The man had been fake feuding with me for decades, sarcasm, pranks, petty competitions, and the whole time he'd been sitting on this little gem like it was a fun inside joke. What? I sputtered, my brain short-circuiting. "You knew we were betrothed and still chose to be the human equivalent of a paper cut." He smirked. "Well, it kept you around?" I have no words. Actually, that's a lie. I had plenty of words. None of them suitable for polite company. Cue identity crisis? I excused myself from the table, muttering something about needing air. Translation: I need to scream into the void and question every life choice that led me here. Betrothed to Declan Wolfe. Suddenly, accidentally marrying him didn't feel like an accident at all. It felt like the universe had been playing the world's longest, most chaotic game of chess, and I was the pawn. Or worse, the queen who never saw the checkmate coming. Chapter 8. The breakup that broke me. You'd think breaking up with someone you were never really dating would be easy. You'd be wrong. Declan and I had crafted the perfect breakup plan. We even outlined it like a business proposal, bullet points, timelines, and contingencies. There were discussions about optimal emotional impact, his words, and debates over who should look more devastated for public sympathy. We both voted for ourselves, naturally. But no flowchart in the world could have prepared me for how it actually felt. Because when we finally ended things, standing in the middle of Fairview Park, where the autumn leaves fell like dramatic metaphors, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt evicted, like someone had packed up my heart, shoved it into a cardboard box labeled "Return to Sender," and left me standing on the emotional curb. This wasn't part of the plan. After our breakup, I tried to get back to my life. Really, I did. I threw myself into work. I reorganized my apartment. I even alphabetized my spice rack because apparently, heartbreak turns you into a middle-aged HGTV host. But none of it worked. Everywhere I went, Declan was there. Not literally, thank God. But in the echoes of our arguments, the ghost of his sarcastic comebacks, the way I accidentally brewed his favorite coffee instead of mine because muscle memory is a traitorous little gremlin. It got so bad that one night, fueled by equal parts desperation and a truly irresponsible amount of caffeine, I made a decision. A bad decision. I was going to win him back. Armed with a crumpled apology I'd scribbled on a napkin, a bouquet of slightly wilted supermarket flowers, and absolutely zero dignity, I marched to his apartment like a woman on a mission. By the time I reached his door, my heart was pounding like it was trying to file an escape plan. I raised my fist to knock. What am I doing? This was Declan Wolfe, the man who'd driven me crazy since childhood, the human embodiment of every eye roll I'd ever given. But he was also the man who knew me better than I knew myself. The man who held my hand when I was scared of flying, even though he pretended it was to prevent me from panicking like a feral raccoon. The man who kissed me like it wasn't fake. I took a deep breath and knocked. The door swung open almost immediately, like he'd been standing there, waiting. And there he was, Declan Wolfe, wearing a plain gray t-shirt, hair messier than usual, like he'd been running his hands through it, probably being exasperated by my existence, as per tradition. I opened my mouth to deliver my heartfelt apology, to pour out all the messy, complicated feelings swirling inside me. But before I could say a single word, I saw what he was holding. A bouquet of flowers. Not fancy, overpriced ones. Just simple, imperfect daisies, the same kind I'd once told him were my favorite, because they don't try too hard, unlike some people I know. Declan looked at me, then at the sad bouquet clutched in my hand, and raised an eyebrow. "Took you long enough," he said, like this was the most obvious thing in the world. My carefully rehearsed speech dissolved faster than my dignity. I laughed, because what else do you do when your fake fiancé, childhood nemesis, and accidental husband beats you to your own grand gesture? Well, I managed, stepping inside. I was aiming for dramatic timing. Nailed it, obviously. He closed the door behind me, setting his flowers on the table next to mine. We stood there, surrounded by awkward silence and mismatched bouquets, until I finally blurted out, "I miss you." Declan didn't smirk, didn't tease. Instead, he reached out, brushing a stray hair from my face, his touch softer than I deserved. "Yeah," he whispered, "I missed you too." And just like that, the plan was officially ruined. But for once, I didn't care. Chapter 9, The Proposal, Take 2. If you told me a year ago that Declan Wolfe, my nemesis, my fake fiancé, my accidental husband, and the human equivalent of a smug spreadsheet, would be down on one knee, proposing to me for real, I would have laughed so hard I'd pull a muscle. Yet there I was, standing in the middle of Fairview's botanical gardens, surrounded by twinkling fairy lights, overpriced peonies, and the lingering scent of irony. Declan was kneeling on one knee, holding a velvet ring box, his usual smugness replaced by something terrifyingly sincere. And you know what my first thought was? Why is he taking so long? Sure, it was heartfelt. Sure, it was dramatic. Sure, it was everything a girl could want. But also inefficient. So naturally, I did the only logical thing. I interrupted him. "You're taking too long. I proposed to you." Declan blinked. The man who always had a sarcastic retort ready was, for once, speechless. Then he laughed. That deep, infuriatingly attractive laugh that had once made me want to throw him into traffic. "Good news," he said, standing up and slipping the ring onto my finger anyway. "You're already my wife." Touché. We kissed, because apparently, that's what you do when you've accidentally married your nemesis, fake dated him, fake broken up with him, and then double proposed like emotionally unstable overachievers. As the fairy lights glimmered above us, and the applause of nosy strangers faded, I had one overwhelming thought. This was never the plan. But maybe that's what made it perfect. Post-credits twist. The Puppet Master. Months later, after the chaos settled, I found myself at my mother's house, sipping tea, and flipping through old family albums. I stumbled upon a dusty envelope labeled in my mother's elegant, passive-aggressive cursive, for strategic use only. Curious, and because I never learned to mind my own business, I opened it. Inside? Copies of documents? Our fake engagement contract, the business merger paperwork, even the accidental marriage certificate from Santoro Bay, all stamped, signed, and suspiciously notarized by someone with handwriting identical to my mother's. I stared at the evidence of my life's most chaotic moments, then slowly turned to look at her. She was sitting across from me, sipping tea with the calm satisfaction of a Bond villain on her day off. "Are you saying," I began, my voice dangerously calm, "that my entire love life is your undercover operation?" She didn't flinch, didn't even pretend to deny it. Instead, she set her teacup down, gave me her sweetest, most innocent smile, and said, "I prefer the term strategic planning." I gawked. "You secured a successful business merger," she interrupted, "ensured your emotional growth, provided me with adorable grandchildren in the near future." I opened my mouth to argue but realized she wasn't wrong. I'd been outmaneuvered by my own mother. Declan found me later, still fuming over the revelation. When I told him, he didn't even look surprised. "Of course she did," he said with a shrug. "She's terrifying. I respect that." And that was it. No dramatic meltdown. No existential crisis. Just the simple, undeniable fact that my love life had been a carefully executed mission led by the most dangerous strategist I knew, Diana Quinn, CEO of Love and Manipulation, Incorporated. But as I sat there, nestled against Declan, his hand warm in mine, I realize something else. Maybe love isn't just war. Maybe it's corporate espionage. And maybe, just maybe, it's a little bit of fate. If you accidentally married your nemesis, what would be the first thing you do? Annul it, embrace the chaos, or demand free cake? Let me know in the comments.